Hey guys, welcome back. Thank you for all the current Pantheon subscribers for being patient as we wait for more game information to flow our way. I appreciate your support, likes, and social media shares as we get the message out about this awesome game. Today we're going to be going over some of the newest Pantheon Rise of the Fall information and questions from the April 27th live stream hosted by CohhCarnage. Additional game-related information can be found in the published section below. Also, in the top right-hand corner, there is an annotation that will link you to all the Pantheon coverage here on the channel. Right off the bat, we're introduced to both the climate and acclimation system. Characters in Pantheon will face dangers even from the weather, and to safeguard ourselves against these forces, we have infusions. Infusions themselves are consumables, very much like a potion, and they have various tiers. They're obtained through drops, but also can be crafted. Infusions have a permanent duration, so they aren't on a timer and can only be removed by the player. Infusions are persistent through death, so this would imply that we'll still have the infusion buff upon being revived. If you've been a regular viewer of the streams, then you'll probably notice, as most of us did today, how the graphics and animations are constantly being improved from the previous presentations. The team did mention that there are 2 dedicated team members who are currently tweaking both the graphics and animation, so this will be an ongoing process that we can all look forward to. Another feature that was highlighted today was the Alarmist feature. I suppose one could characterize this as a more in-depth and immersive way of experiencing aggro linking among NPCs. It certainly gives the player the impression that the NPCs are acting consciously and dynamically with the environment instead of rudimentary proximity triggering. The death penalty was brought up again, and the team mentioned that it is still being tuned. However, they did elaborate on the fact that consensual or friendly corpse looting will not be in the game. However, consensual corpse dragging may be part of the permitted mechanic, but a lot of these details are yet to be determined. Another major highlight that was revisited and the team expanded upon with some interesting information was that of PvP. What was mentioned was that PvP will be in the game, however aspects of PvP versus PvE may have different server build mechanics. What this means is, and I'm paraphrasing the outline given, is that say if a paladin wasn't as effective or powerful in PvP and needed tweaking to be a little more competitive in the PvP environment, these tweaks will not necessarily be translated to the PvE paladin. So in other words, PvP servers may have a different build mechanic for classes that will be exclusive to the PvP server. This really caught my attention because, as everyone knows, the rock, paper, scissor combination of any MMO class is almost always being challenged, so the idea that developers can make tweaks to enhance PvP for that exclusive balance is pretty interesting. The issue of modding was also brought up, and the team gave a rather resounding response by stating emphatically that modding will not be allowed in the game. More specifically, any third-party program that gives a character player any kind of an advantage is not permitted. UI skins, on the other hand, is something that was outlined, but there wasn't any particular details about what would be permitted in regards to allowing players to customize their UI. As most of us have gathered during the course of following Pantheon, one of the most significant characteristics about the game is that it is group-oriented. So when soloing was brought up today, the team reiterated that they do encourage players to participate in groups. However, players can solo, but the content may pose quite a bit more of a challenge for them. Naturally, the question that followed rather ubiquitously is there a particular class that may be better at soloing than another? The team simply stated that no one class is selectively better at soloing per se, as this may also depend on the player's skill. The team didn't go into a lot of detail about soloing because there is, of course, any number of different factors that goes into a player picking a particular class or play style, and we can only assume that a lot of the testing thus far has centered mainly around group play. I will confess that I do enjoy soloing, and perhaps a good many current MMOs are probably completely accustomed to the practice, so this will be quite an interesting dynamic, but we really won't know how effective or practical soloing will be until we get into the game ourselves. Ranged weapon characters and their ability to have their coveted ammo was discussed today, and the team mentioned that crafting will play a part in ensuring that ranged weapon characters have the ammo they need. Packs and storage containers were mentioned as well, but like any MMO, I'm sure we'll have to work our way up to the larger packs and bags. But suffice it to say that crafting in the field will probably be at least one way ranged weapon characters will be able to stay supplied. Crowd control, which is an important aspect to group play, was touched on as well. More specifically, would certain classes have some sort of crowd control like root, ensnare, or other quick escape ability? And a team mentioned that some classes would have a simple or short usage ability that may help them in some crowd control situations. But this, of course, is going to vary by class and the particular skill slash spell slash ability that a character may have. As we move along into other highlights covered in the stream, thank you guys for bearing with me. I've had a cold for several days. I just wanted to say that I'm sure the team could have elaborated a little more in depth about many of the questions being covered here, but naturally they were pressed for time and they were on a bit of a tight schedule. You're welcome to leave your questions, opinions, and thoughts in the comments section below, and I'll see if there was a particular question or answered that was mentioned during the stream that I wasn't able to cover in the course of this commentary. Dual boxing made it into this discussion during the stream. It would appear that it will be allowed. Those of you who want to run multiple characters will have that option. However, macros will not be permitted when you're running your additional characters. The team mentioned that despite having this ability, they felt that a single character in a game will stay busy enough that running two accounts may not seem as practical. But like soloing, you're never really going to know people's capabilities until they are actually in the game. Camping and unique spawns also made it into the discussion during the stream, and the team stated that we can expect to have the traditional and infamous spawn camps. They did mention that they wanted to ensure that the appropriate times were set for these particular spawns, and not like the days of EQ where we could wait days for an elusive NPC, but the team didn't go into any major details concerning these times. Something that was brought up during the stream that I think kind of confused some people was that of the Keeper. As best I understand it, a keeper is simply someone who participates in questing, kind of like someone who participates in crafting. So a keeper is perhaps just a vernacular similar to describing someone as a quester. The team also touched on a few areas concerning the perception system, or more specifically that it was built for the purposes of investigating and granting a form of insight. The perception system or insight doesn't necessarily benefit a particular class, nor is it an innate skill that works best for a particular class or race. The team mentioned that they did toss around a few ideas about expanding on the perception system and whether it would have some sort of benefit to a particular class, or whether they wanted the perception system to have other kinds of characteristics, but this was mostly banter and didn't receive any additional considerations. Spellcasting. Can we move while casting, or do we have to remain static? As an old school EQ player, I found this question highly suspect, but of course I'm imposing my old school casting bias in the interpretation of the question and the days of playing on dial-up. The team did mention that some spells may be cast on the move, and that there would be even some insta-cast spells. However, there will also be those that would require that you remain static. Twinking will be possible in Pantheon, however gear stats will be scalable by level, or there will be some tier system requirements before a character can receive certain gear benefits. The team mentioned that gear will perhaps have more practical uses like that of the progeny system or other potential game benefits. Training mobs or mob trains will be in Pantheon. The team quickly addressed this topic by stating that if a player or players are intentionally interfering with other players' game experience, they will address this behavior as it becomes an issue. This kind of highlights and serves as another example of how Pantheon is reaching into the classic reputation aspect of gameplay. So be considerate of your fellow players so that hand-holding mechanics don't have to be introduced into the game. Drive-by buffing and spell support will be permitted in the game. You won't have to be grouped to cast spells on neighboring players. Keep in mind here that buffs will scale, so they will have to be level appropriate. Mounts and familiars will be in the game, as these were some of the general questions that people were asking. Naturally, there will be a lot more detail pertaining to both mounts and familiars, which I'm sure we'll learn about later. No drop soulbound and unique item drops will be part of the Pantheon world. Naturally, items with specific significance will have certain tunable properties to them, like quest-related drops. This, of course, will vary by item. Pantheon will not have instance zones. This includes dungeons as well. The environment will be represented as all current players see it. The team did mention that they can scale and populate environments to compensate for game pace. Naturally, this is going to fall under server load, so we'll have to see how this will be addressed once players are in the game environment. There will be a mentor system for players who want to group with lower level friends. I'm sure we'll get more details about this mechanic as game development continues. Traveling in game is always a bit of a challenge for the game designers because it requires a certain level of balance when it comes to how effectively a player can go from one area to another versus how quickly the player can go from one area to another. Traveling by foot will be the primary means in the early game. The team did mention that we'd see boats and caravans along with mounts. All this will most likely scale and be level centric, but of course getting that proper balance along with port and translocation spells is still a work in progress. And that's going to wrap up this look at the April 27th live stream. You're welcome to share your thoughts, comments, questions, and opinions in the published section below. If you're new to my channel or a frequent Pantheon visitor, consider clicking that watermark in the bottom right hand corner to subscribe. This way you'll have all the latest news, updates, and releases from Pantheon.